Hello, everybody. Welcome to another CII Delhi State webinar. I am super excited to have fantastic experts with us. As you all know, uh, we are going from lockdown 3.0, lockdown 4.0, and maybe in the next few days, lockdown 5.0. And at this point, different states have said that private offices and public offices can start functioning again. Different guidances. Some are saying, 33% of employees can come back. Others, quite frankly, are saying none. But all of them have a very simple ask, is that every single organization does its best to ensure the safety and security of its people. Obviously, this is a little bit more complicated, given that some states have in fact put a little bit of liability on employers as well, that if they don't take standardized precautions, they might be liable if somebody in their office gets sick with COVID-19. This has created a bit of an issue here, and I'm super excited to have our panelists. Vivian Vickers, who is supposed to join us, is having a little bit of technical difficulties. We are going to try to grab him in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But I have with us Parnika Narayan and Harbhajan Singhji. Welcome, Pati. How are things going on there? How is the, are you guys at home? Are you at work?
Hello.
Mr. Singh.
Yeah, Aditya.
Are you calling in from home, from work? How are things going?
I am from home only. My kids won't allow me to move out of the house anymore. But occasionally I have to go and just see what is going on the office front. And like everybody, the preparations are on in the industry. I find that all the friends whom we come across and what they share is more or less on the similar lines, social distancing, being using the sanitization as much as possible and using masks to ensure that the droplets do not transfer. So these are some of the things. And then checking the temperature while the employees are coming to the organization and helping them to maintain that distancing by making them stand in the queues and all. These are some of the things which, space-wise or the physical distancing are being practiced across the board in the industry, whether it is manufacturing or in the offices.
Brilliant, G. And I think Vivian has just joined us. Vivian, can you say a few words just so we know that you're up and running? Vivian? We'll get back to him. Parnika, what I'd love to start off, and by the way, welcome to all of us, all of our people who are joining us from LinkedIn live stream. Thank you very much for being here. We'd love to take your questions and answers as well. Can we please start perhaps with a quick presentation? I know you've prepared. For our audience members, welcome. Thank you for joining. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. We really want to keep this interactive for you, and we want to make sure that by the end of this webinar, every single question that you have asked, which is on theme, is answered. Parnika, over to you, Parnika, if you can start your screen share.
Thank you so much, Aditya, for having me join your panel today. So this past month actually has been really busy because a lot of our clients have been getting in touch with us, and people have been trying to make sense of all that's happening with all the various lockdowns and then opening up and the fears of COVID, which are still very much there. So we've been doing a lot of research and working with our clients and figuring out various things that need to be done. So we've put together a little slideshow, which we've shared with some of our clients as well, and I'm happy to share it here. I'll just start a screen share if you bear with me. Okay, is that visible?
Yes, that's visible. Thank you.
Is that visible?
Yeah, great.
Okay, thanks. So this, so there are, there are actually a large number of, in terms of, so other than the physical environment, there are a large number of things that need to be looked into for getting our offices up and running, which include protocols and SOPs and implementation, monitoring, and all of that. So since we are architects and designers, so our main focus has been on how the physical environment can be modified. So moving on with that, if we first look at the first point of contact that we have with the outside world, which is our point of entry, our reception areas. So, there are all scales of interventions that we can go into, but we're focusing on looking at the simplest steps that people can implement right now to get going. So one simple thing is that wherever you don't have automatic doors, for instance, if you could keep your doors open, then that reduces contact that people need to have with the doors. Then if you have touch-based access control systems like the finger scanning system and things, then if you could either disable those or, well, initially you can just disable those, and in the long run, maybe you can look at installing a different kind of system, which could be like an RFID system, or it could be for a higher security facility, you may want to go in for something a little more sophisticated, like a face scanning or a palm vein authentication sort of system. The next thing is that once people are in, then our receptionists are people who are most susceptible to contracting some sort of infection by people who are coming in contact with them. So it's very important for us to install some sort of transparent screen protections for them. So if that's not possible, then the next best thing that we can do is maintain the distance. So probably go in for markings on the floor, which can be done with decals, and essentially just maintain like a 5 to 6 feet distance from the receptionist's desk so that they are safe, and we provide them protective gear. So masks are actually essential for everybody. So that's our first level of protection, and that's something that everybody should have. And of course, the receptionist can be given masks and a face shield. If required, then gloves. And they should be also sensitized to not sharing stationery. If people are coming in and signing on some register or something, there should be separate pens. Either people use their own, or there's a separate pen that's provided to people so that the receptionist doesn't have to share hers. Other than that, then if we can have a separate space designated for deliveries, so that when your delivery personnel are not coming deep into the office, they can leave the deliveries over there. And if possible, then you can let the delivery sit out for a couple of days. Normally 3 days is adequate for most kind of products. And if not possible, then proper sanitization procedure can be followed over there before bringing the deliveries in. So that's for our entry points. Coming next, the next key thing is reducing contact points. So contact points is actually a very key precaution that needs to be taken. So one simplest thing that we can do is install hand sanitizers at strategic places. So possibly, installing hand sanitizers next to doors, so where people are touching handles frequently. So if immediately before touching the handle or after touching the handle, if they're sanitizing their hands, then the handle also gets sanitized and people are safe. So even though they have touched a frequently touched surface, they are not carrying viruses.
So Monica, I have a question here, right? Now I've seen these non-contact door opening button pressing stuff, right? And I've seen some very lovely innovations. I've seen people use forks and chopsticks and all sorts of interesting. The one you're showing is, of course, a very nice fancy hook with all of this thing. Mm-hmm. I presume then part of it is then training people to sanitize the hook itself after a while, because otherwise the hook is actually transferring germs from place to place, and that's the same problem we have with gloves.
Yeah, so gloves are actually not a very good idea, because with that's not very easy for us to sanitize, and once you're wearing gloves also, you're a little less cautious. So the gloves are essentially transferring the virus from one place to another. So
absolutely,
not using gloves is actually a better idea. Use your hands, sanitize your hands, wash them frequently. And well, basic common sense, now that so many more studies have come in, and CDC and John Hopkins and all, they've come out with revised findings. So it just essentially makes sense that you keep your hands away from your face, and as long as the virus is not reaching your eyes and nose and mouth, you're mostly safe. So masks, therefore, are really important. Everybody must wear a mask. So that's also preventing virus from them from going further. And also, even if by chance they've touched something, then they are not by mistake touching their mouth or their nose or something and getting the virus into them.
Brilliant.
So, yes,
Please go ahead.
definitely.
That was one of the questions that got asked, so I thought I clarified right now.
Okay. So definitely these keys, obviously they have to be sanitized. And so little things that people are doing is that, they're keeping, for instance, you can keep the key in your right pocket and remember that, you've got it there and you're not just putting your hand in there. It makes more sense actually that after you've used it, then you sanitize it and then keep it away. There are also somewhere, you can tie it to a hook, like to your trouser, to your belt or something. You tie it to yourself with one of those twisty key ring kind of things, because they're quite small, these gadgets. So yes, they definitely need to be sanitized. And but yeah, they protect you from having to touch things with your own hands. So it's a nifty little thing. Sorry.
Have you seen a case, where you have some of these lying at the reception area, and then whoever comes in, you sanitize and hand them out, and then when they leave, they sort of sanitize and give it back? Or are you recommending everybody sort of just like their ID card or their yes, corporate ID or etc., they carry it back and forth with them from home and to the office?
Yeah. So the recommended thing is that each employee has one of their own. So, it's a little thing, and rather than going in for very large expenses for various things, I mean, if a company invests in getting these and gifting each employee one of these little things like a keychain, then that should be, that's a better thing to do rather than trying to share these. Because,
and great opportunity for corporate branding as well, right?
Yeah, gifting opportunity, branding.
There, and make it work well. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So there are vendors who are offering to put your brand on it as well. So these are now being made here in India, along with this foot handle, which is also a new product which has come into the market.
This is now a new gifting opportunity. By the way, these key guys aren't paying me to, promote their keys. I'm just really excited about the concept of another new product that can be sold in the market.
So you're getting these in metal, you're getting them in plastic. People are coming out with products every day. So yeah, quite interesting.
I'll let you get back to the presentation, please. And again, for all of us who are out there who have joined us either on Zoom or on LinkedIn, etc., please ask questions. We really want to take your questions, very specific to the theme. Would love to answer them. Please go ahead, Pernika.
Okay, so there are these little innovations. Of course, there's the foot handles, and so the main thing is to reduce the touch points that are being called now. Other than this, yes, like I mentioned earlier, so where you have frequently touched surfaces, you have sanitizers. They should be placed at strategic places. Everybody should have their own at their desks as well. Encourage employees to wipe down their desks and their personal items themselves regularly. And yeah, other surfaces like light switches and the photocopiers and things like that, which people end up using in common, those should also be frequently wiped with the, it should be sanitized. Okay, now coming to workstations, that's the heart of where all office operations happen. So since the primary thing to be avoided is actually the contaminated respiratory droplets, which is what is now known to be transferring the virus. So the key thing is social distancing. Now, what is happening is that the main recommended thing is that, people should be 6 feet apart. So we understand that in most operational offices or most offices which are already set up, it's not easy for people to start moving around desks. You already have all your services, your electricals and everything going. So it's not a practical solution to say that, move your desk 6 feet apart. So the thing to do immediately is open with leaving alternate desks vacant so that there is that distancing maintained. Other solutions are also there which you can go in for, like there are sneeze guards which are available. These are essentially like plexiglass or glass screens, transparent screens which you can put up, and these so you can see them on the image on the top right hand side. These are taller than regular screens. So essentially it segregates your work desk space, so there's nothing getting transferred onto your screen, onto your
Now,
desk space.
Parnika, now I love this idea of this sneeze guards, right? Okay. Now for those offices who have at least something like a larger desk, like I know there are certain call centers and places where, you're looking at about a 2.5 feet, maybe 3 feet average desk size.
Yeah.
That might be too small. And that's where you might have to do one person, and then leave those desks and thing. But the picture that you've shown on the screen is fairly large, right? I mean, this is what each desk is probably what 5 feet, 6 feet in itself.
So the
Or
one
is
to
just
the
that
left,
image?
yes. So the one to the left is actually showing about 3.5, 4 feet desks, and alternate desks have been left vacant.
I meant the one on the top right corner, the one with
On the
those
top,
wonderful sneeze guards.
on the top right corner, actually, this is showing like a meeting room table, which has been
Oh my!
converted.
So you're segregating the meeting room table with sneeze guards as well.
So this has been
It did look
converted to
quite big.
function.
It
Yeah.
did look quite big.
So what some people have done, depending on the number of people they needed to bring in, so they converted meeting rooms into spaces where you could bring additional people to sit and work, because most people are now quite accustomed to having their meetings as Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings. So as far as that works, it's actually a more recommended thing to do rather than bring people into one space. So yeah, so actually sneeze guards, yeah, what you were talking about, your question about larger desks is there. Yes, if your desks are 5 feet wide or 5.5 feet wide in any case, then there is that 5.5 feet distance is already there between people. But what the sneeze guards facilitate actually is that even if this distance is not so much, then that space, you have a physical barrier in between. So the transfer of those respiratory droplets will not happen. And on top of that, if people are wearing masks, I mean, if the only thing is that people are not,
It's a
they do
fairly
not
good
want to.
space, right?
Yeah. So it makes things much safer. And the other thing is that if you look at the image on the left, that there are these, most cases you have doubly loaded workstations. So there's somebody sitting across from you. So in that case, the maximum distance between you is 4.5 feet. So over there, it becomes more crucial to have this sort of screen guard, because if somebody's sneezing, sitting in front of you and they sneeze or they cough or they're talking and, some droplets get transferred, then that could be a little problematic. So for situations like that, it's more advisable.
No, and I think we have a question from Mr. Khanna, and he makes the point that look, even overuse of hand sanitizers is probably not a good thing, and having these contactless surfaces, having these sneeze guards, having that spacing where you're not having to sanitize your hands every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes is probably a much better idea. Point well taken, sir. And I think what I love about this is a great midway to at least get some protection into the desks without having to completely waste your square footage that you've paid for, quite frankly, and you can't use because of this new social distancing mechanism.
Yeah. So right now, even the norms were, more stringent, that only 30% people or 50% people. But, frankly speaking, where real estate is so expensive, on an average, you may be paying 100 rupees a square foot, 120 rupees a square foot. And if you can only bring in 30% or 50% of your people, then, how viable is it for the business you're really killing it.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just tell everyone to work from home and just move to, to a suburban place where you have, just a few employees who actually need to be there in person. Fully agreed.
So we have to, find sustainable solutions in the long run so that you can bring more people in. Yes, where from 150 square feet per person, as per the international norms, if we've come down to 50 square feet per person where we're designing, then, we may not be able to go up to 150, but we need to find solutions that we can at least go up to, say 75, 80 or something like that, where we are still able to keep our people safe and have a reasonable number of people operating. Yes, safely, of course, that is very important, but we need to find solutions which are sustainable in the long run. The other thing we need to be careful about with workstations is the circulation space. So if there is some workstation which is falling in a space where, a lot of people are moving around, then we would need to look at, that particular situation where either we put up some more, safeguards in terms of screens to protect that person, or you may need to leave that desk vacant. Another thing which is important is marking the desks which are to be left vacant so that by mistake nobody comes and occupies it. So using some sort of stickers or decals or something to mark that is also something which is a good practice. The other thing is hot desking.
My apologies, but I have a couple of live questions on this. A few clarifications. Mr. Shah is asking how much social distancing, and this is a clarification. We've talked about tables, but between seats, right? It's 3 feet or 6 feet.
So, so we are saying do gaz ki duri, but I mean, if you think about it, so ideally, I would say about 1.5 meters is what we should look at keeping. That's about 5 feet. So between 5 and 6 feet, because I mean, if somebody is sneezing, then you know how far those droplets do carry. So there is
right, absolutely. And Mr. Shah, please have a look at the image on the left. What's the way mentally I think we should all look at this is look at a large circular diameter around the central person, right? And so what I love about this image is that we have these beautiful diameters drawn here. And with those diameters, you can see that each person has to be at least 5 feet or 6 feet away from each other. So it's not just the desks, it's also the chairs themselves, because at the end of the day, we are trying to manage individuals, not furniture, so to speak. I think also, some of the small things which we perhaps didn't talk about is people don't just randomly magically appear on their desks and their chairs, right? And to Pernika's point right now, they have to get up, they have to move around, they have to go, pick up a printout, they have to go out and make a phone call. And so it's not just about just the physical distance between the chairs, but it's also the space around the entire, what do you call it, your office modular system or furniture, so that as people are walking about, for the most part, you're able to, if people are being conscious about it, be actually able to maintain those 6 feet. I think a problem is, for example, if you see this image and it's stacked up very close to a wall, the person on the top left would not be able to leave without infringing on that 6 feet space of the person in the bottom left, for that matter. And so I think it's very important there for us to just think about this as personal space, social distancing, and then the furniture has to adapt to that.
So there are a couple of things here, like you were saying about the circulation space. So in the long run, going forward, we may see an increase in the amount of circulation space that we are leaving, like the width of the aisles. So that may be something that we can do when we are planning another space. But immediately, that's not something that you can do. So at the moment, it's more about staggering people, having them sit in at alternate desks, or maybe sitting in alternate aisles, because this person that you're seeing in the left, the image on the left, so you're seeing one cluster of desks, but on the back of this, after some space, would be another cluster of desks. So if that cluster is too close to this cluster, then they would also be walking right from behind the other. So one thing which addresses the problem to a certain extent is masks, because if your respiratory droplets are not leaving from that area and they're getting trapped already by the mask, then they're not traveling to the next person. So that is a safeguard. But if you're too close and you have to move chairs around to be able to get past, then that would be problematic, and that kind of space does need to be addressed.
Mr. Singh, you had a point here. Mr. Singh, you have to unmute yourself. Or let me do that for you.
Yeah, thank you, Aditya. Actually, what is being presented by Pernika is very useful. But I was only thinking, we all know that how does this transmission happens? All the actions which are being taken are to protect ourselves from the droplets, which can get transmitted if they directly come as a droplets in contact with nose, eyes, or ears or mouth. So everybody is suggesting masking your face so that the droplets do not directly enter through these places. Second is that washing hands, not necessarily, as I was seeing Mr. Khanna asking that, extreme usage of sanitizers could be bad. Actually, in my view, extreme of anything is bad. So if a plain washing of the hands and a proper hygiene is maintained of the hands for most of the times, because it is very natural for us to touch our faces, eyes and all, for all human beings. So means I think that if a habit of washing the hands intermittently develops, even without sanitizers, as the doctors and the medical fraternity is impressing upon, that will be make a big difference. Second is distancing.
Mr. Singh, so
These three
quick
basic
question on that.
things.
In a 8 to 10 hour workday,
Yeah.
how many times a day should people go and wash their hands?
See, I tell you, it depends. How many times were you really washing earlier? Maybe you were washing once after a gap of 3 hours, or maybe only before you were consuming food, or after you had finished food, or after you had, sometimes if you perceive that your hands had become dirty, you had the inclination to go and wash your hands. But now if you make it as a practice, because knowingly or unknowingly, you don't know that the surface that you may be touching, your desk that you may be touching, the keyboard that you may be touching, the phone that you may be touching, if that is contaminated by some droplet of which even you may not be aware of, so it is better that you make some sort of habit that every 45 minutes or 40 minutes or as frequent as possible, just go and wash it with a soap. I think that is something which is more useful than going for extreme use of sanitizers.
So, I think, I would really hesitate to see that, if everybody's getting up every 45 minutes to go to the bathroom to wash their hands. I think in certain spaces that works, in certain other spaces that does not work. But I think the bigger point is that a combination of hand sanitization and hand washing is what we really require. Of course, I think no one's recommending that you have a bell that, okay, bell is pushed, everybody go wash your hands now. I don't think anybody is saying that.
It will vary from individual to individual.
Absolutely. But consciously, particularly if you're working in a high touch environment, if you're moving around the office, if you're going to sit at the same desk and you're not really moving for 2 to 3 hours, maybe you don't need to go and wash your hands every 45 minutes. Not much has changed, right? But if you're moving around the office, you're going to meeting rooms, you're meeting people, perhaps you're not using that beautiful key device as well, maybe washing your hands every hour and a half hour is great. And in combination with some amount of hand sanitization, up to a point where you're comfortable, I think maybe works well. So point well taken, Ji. Hand washing is a real alternative.
Masking all the time is also very inconvenient. When you are sitting in your own car and driving, maybe I find many people using the mask even while they are driving in their cars with all the glasses up and all. And I think that that is really not. It is suffocating also. Like many a times, if you have to wear it all the time, it is suffocating. So when you are in an environment where there is no one in the vicinity, no one in the close distance of 5 meters or 6 meters, putting it all the times. It means if you are in a crowded area, or if you are in an area where there is a lot of you know people pouring in or passing across you, that time the usage of mask is a must. But if you are alone in a space where there is no other human being in the vicinity, or is at a very safer distance, putting it all the time may be very inconvenient.
No, and I take Mr. Singh's point, and I do want to share that there are certain places in India and in the world who make it mandatory to wear your mask even while you're driving. And the reason why they make it mandatory is they want us to get into the habit of making sure that we have a mask on at all times. Also to make sure that they know that you have a mask. A lot of people might actually leave the mask at home, drive around, and then enforcement, whether it's police or healthcare workers, can't see whether you actually have a mask or not. But I think for
Aditya, now there is a fine of 5,000
well-regulated
rupees.
people.
If you don't wear a mask in public, there is a fine of 5,000 rupees.
Absolutely, and in some countries it's higher. And so I think if you are a disciplined professional person, obviously we presume you will make good choices on when to wear masks, how much to do hand washing, what to do with hands. If you are a company, making sure that you don't get sued for spreading COVID, or your director doesn't get arrested for spreading COVID, maybe you want to make masks mandatory. So I think this is one of the ambiguous things that we will all struggle with. There is, of course, the tendency to prevent legal liability to go extreme. And you can convert your entire office into an ICU, install HEPA filters. You've all seen those images of airplane with face guards and, full plastic PPEs. We can do that. That's probably an extreme. Completely doing nothing is also an extreme. And so all of us are going to have to find a place in the middle which works. And I do recommend people that, don't take random layman words. Make sure to look at the science, because as Singhji has said, as Pranika has said, that there is science behind this. How far do droplets go? How long do droplets and can the virus survive on various materials? Now, as we hit June almost, this data has come in. And so particularly those who are looking at figuring out their SOPs for their workplace, make sure every single SOP that you're putting there is backed by solid scientific evidence. And that's how you are safe, both from a physical COVID perspective, but also from a legal perspective. Right? Perfect, Pranika, please
want to make
go
one
ahead.
more point.
Mr. Singh, please.
See, social stigma which is getting attached to the people who get infected from virus, it does creates a personal havoc in their life. So in the offices, there should be a strong communication that it is only a disease. We should not start discriminating people to such a level that we start eliminating them as somebody who can be very dangerous to the society even once after they are cured. So that communication also has to be
Parnika, I know you have lots of slides, so I want to get back to you so we can go through these quickly and then move to some of the amazing questions that we have.
All right. So the last thing about workstations that I wanted to mention is that we should encourage all our team members to wipe down their own desks personally with sanitizer, and also their personal items like a keyboard, mouse, telephone. These are things that they're also touching frequently, and their own switches and plugs at their workstations. So that's another thing. Going forward, okay. So common facilities, these are also something that these are places where either a large number of people are gathering, like your canteens, or places where a large number of people are visiting during the course of the day, like the toilets or the water dispensing stations or your tea coffee machines. So these are areas which become very critical. We need to address these. So in terms of, if we look at cafeterias first, so here again, we need to be very careful about implementing social distancing. We need to make markings on which seats need to be left vacant or reduce the number of seats so that the distance is maintained. The other thing is that, in any case, most offices don't have cafeterias large enough to accommodate full capacity. So it could be encouraged that, people eat at their own desks, or if they go out of the office, if you have a terrace space or you have some outdoor space that people can go to, they can go out, they can eat in the outdoors, because fresh air is actually very critical. And we'll talk about it later also, but a very key thing is bringing fresh air into the space, and diluting the virus concentrations, if at all there are any. So how we deal with cafeterias becomes crucial. The other thing is, for toilets, like urinals, the way they are spaced currently, you may need to leave one vacant, or you may need to leave your block off one wash basin. So ensure that that's happening. Ensure that handles and knobs and things are being wiped are being sanitized frequently. Another important thing is to do with the HVAC in toilets. Yes, Aditya.
Monica, I'm going to pause you there. How often?
So, well, if we speak of ideal situations, it should actually be wiped after every use, but that is probably not practical.
Really happen.
That's not practical. So, people, again, the best thing is that to maintain your own hygiene. I mean, if you're going to the toilet, in any case, you would not be touching your face. So as long as, once you're done from there, you wash your hands, you come out. And I would want to come back to the point of, washing your hands repeatedly. Yes, I am also not in favor of using too much chemicals, and what sustained use of chemicals will do to our bodies. I'm sure researches are going on in that. But once you've washed your hands, you've touched the door of the toilet, you've come out, then that you need to sanitize, because you have touched commonly touched surfaces again. So that's why it becomes critical that once you get to your desk, then you sanitize your hands. And at that point, once you're at your desk, if you have sneeze guards around you, you want to take off your mask over there, go ahead, you can take off your mask over there. But if you're walking in the common aisles, you're walking from behind somebody, then put your mask back on. And especially if you're sitting in a place where it's constricted, your space is constricted, there isn't enough space for people to be moving around without coming in contact with you or your chair or your desk, then you may want to keep your mask on, because it's essentially for your own security. But yes, if you have space available, then at your own workstation you may take it off, but while walking around, for your own sake, for others' sake, you should put that back on.
Now, I want to add one thing here, everyone. We had that awful piece of news that the head of Ames sanitation had succumbed to COVID and died. And so here, and we are saying that you should increase the frequency of cleaning of your bathrooms. Obviously, that's a function of how many people use it. If you have a small office of 5 people and and the bathrooms aren't being used that often, definitely very different compared to a high traffic office, or if you have a lot of external people coming in and perhaps using your toilets there. And so you have to decide, hourly, half an hourly, just based on the number of people. But while you're doing this, please make sure the sanitation workers, whether employed by you or by a third-party agency, have adequate personal protective gear, much more than what you would use, because do note they are going to be exposed to a large number of people while they are going to wipe this out, while they are going into this environment. And I know Pranika is going to talk about, air filtration in bathrooms, because they tend to get very concentrated in terms of air. But because they're going to be exposed to this environment, because they are going to be exposed to your office throughout the day as people come in, and particularly for those, again, public facing, where you don't have control of who's there, and you have a lot of people who are coming in, and we all expect that every office or every responsible organization has someone who is consistently cleaning these spaces. And so make sure they have good personal protective equipment. Make sure that you go above and beyond what you would give to your own employees, because these are frontline workers. They're the same way and very similarly exposed to what you would say a doctor or a nurse has to go through. And training for them also is very important. just a classic standard, wipe and a few sprays is not going to work anymore. You have to have, instruct them on the usage of bleach. How do you clean surfaces properly, particularly corners? Focusing on high used surfaces first. A tap is going to be a lot more high use than, maybe behind the, bathroom mirror or something, or a corner there. And so if you have a large space with a lot of things to clean, you might even do a shift-based differentials where more frequently you clean the high usage surfaces, and then maybe once in 3 hours or once in 5 hours, you do another deep clean of the non-use surfaces where the risk is low. And this is where a risk-based assessment is something that you should absolutely do, and work with your facility management company if it's there to come out with a profile that works for your office. If you don't have one, if you're employing the people themselves, please take reasonable and as much as possible scientifically educated guesses on how frequently you need to clean the surfaces. I am going to be honest, it also has to make sense for you from an economic perspective.
Yeah.
So figure out that balance, because it is important to get that right from the get-go. Monica, back to you and air handling in bathrooms or cafeterias.
Okay, so one more thing, where you're talking about cleaning, we were discussing that, maybe it would be a better idea to have another person. So one person who's cleaning the WC bowls and the urinals and things, and he's, got his gloves on. If there is another person who is sanitizing the, the locks and the handles and things, that would be a good idea, because, no matter how much you say it, we have seen it in malls, we have seen it in many places, that the person may be wearing gloves and cleaning the bathrooms, but eventually they're going to use with their gloves on, they're operating the handles and they're coming out. So actually the contaminants may be spreading. So if you have another person whose responsibility it is to keep wiping down the other surfaces which, the users would be touching, like the handles and the locks and the taps, then that would be a good idea. So another thing about what I was talking about, the air handling, is that, the other studies that have shown is that when you flush a toilet, then the plumes that rise from that, the moisture droplets, if there is any contaminant over there, then that is also mixing with the air and traveling. So it is very important that you have a good amount of exhaust happening directly from the toilets, and it's exhausting out directly, not getting mixed with the return air in the office. Because then, apart. So normally in a well-designed space, as per good practice, you would not be having your toilet air mixing with the return air in any case because of smell and other such problems. But especially in a scenario like this today, where if somebody is asymptomatic and has the infection, then it can spread in this manner. Okay, coming to other implementation related things. So one very important thing is if you can have a designated isolation room in your office. So an ideal location for this would be closer to your entry point, because in case somebody is symptomatic and you need to move them to the isolation room, it should be a space from where they can easily be shifted to a medical facility, or the medics can get to that person without necessarily having to go through your entire office. So having an isolation room which has a separate, preferably a separate air circulation system or direct exhaust out of it, that would be a good thing to do. Other than that, other smaller things like have adequate number of waste bins strategically located, so people are not having to walk, till the end of the aisle to go and throw something. Then if the bins have colored liners, different colors, so that that this is high contamination, if you're throwing PPE and masks and things, so possibly higher contamination waste versus lower contamination waste. Then if you have your, for your cleaning of toilets and all, you have your checklists and you have them pinned up. It also helps in building confidence among the users. Additionally, for your garbage collection, please designate a separate area where all these garbage bags would be collected and taken from where they can be picked up, and also look at treating that area as a possible contamination area.
By the way, I cannot stress the importance of checklists. In any environment, whether it is in airplanes or hospitals or any high risk profession and situation, we always see the Pareto principle applicable, the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Everybody always remembers 80% what to do. They always forget the 20%. And that's the 20% that makes planes crash. That's what makes doctors and nurses make errors. People die. And in the case of COVID-19 and your office, that 20% is what's going to lead someone to get infected. And that's spread throughout your workplace. So please use checklists. I know all of us, including me, feel very strongly about our ability to remember and understand and everything. And I think, but the point here is from a de-risking strategy. It's not enough to be right 90% or 80% of the time. You need to be right 100%. And the only way to ensure that is to make sure that you use checklists, your employees use checklists. This is part of your standing operating procedures. I know most workspaces have, and you've seen it, even the government uses it in its public places, where you'll have sanitization checklists, what time, who cleaned what was cleaned.
Yeah.
For yourself, if you want a personal checklist, how many times did you wash your hands per day? All those small checklists, they can be a bit of a bother to start with. I'm not going to lie, highly inconvenient, but they're the only way to make sure that you are able to get it right 100% of the time. And trust me when I tell you, once you start a checklist system, within a week, you will have a moment where you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I have this checklist because I completely forgot point number 6 because I was busy. And again, your brain should be occupied with serving your customers, making money, doing stuff for your shareholders and contributing to society. Your brain should not be occupied with trying to stop COVID in your workplace. Outsource all of that to a checklist, right? So you don't have to think of everything all the time, and you have a checklist to make sure, hey, am I following everything? Great, on track, go back to my work. And this is a great way to stop yourself from what I call COVID sanitation stress at this point. Mr. Singh, I know you have to, sorry, Pranika, could you repeat that?
I said COVID sanity.
COVID sanity. Mr. Singh, I know you have to run, and I do want to get Vivian in as well at some point. Any last point that you wanted to make?
I would only say that don't be in a hurry to die. Always use the knowledge, whichever you get. Because if you follow the system of checklists, if you follow the system of SOPs, and if you make it a habit and way of life to protect yourself, only then the others will get protected. Otherwise, even unknowingly, you can cause a damage. Your immunity may be very high, but the people who get in touch with you, if their immunity is not high and if you are a carrier of the virus, you may pose a great threat to their existence. So please, for heaven's sake, just follow and practice rigorously and don't use Pareto principle. Don't take any chances. That is my final comment, sir.
Thank you so much, Singh. And I think we can all take that to heart. I mean, at the end of the day, even if our employees are young, and India has an extraordinary number of young people working, but they have parents and grandparents at home, or they are in touch with other employees, may have wives, siblings, husbands, children who might have unique conditions that put them at higher risk to COVID-19. So it's not just about keeping your employees safe, it's about keeping their families, their communities, their buildings, their society safe. And so what we're doing in the office space is not just restricted to us. Our consequences reverberate across so much more. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Singh. Whenever you need to leave, please do. I know you have a very busy schedule today, and deeply appreciate your joining us. Pranika, back to you.
Okay, so I'm now moving to air conditioning, which is a tricky one. Many people have questions about this, especially, people have concerns that is air conditioning spreading the virus? Should we not be running our air conditioning systems? So I think there has been some more clarity on this in the recent, the recent studies and more findings that people have had. So I think, considering the kind of climatic conditions that we have, especially in Delhi and around, it's really not possible with this kind of the way the temperatures are going and the heat wave to not run our air conditioning. So I think we shouldn't get alarmed, but the main mantra is ventilate, ventilate, ventilate. It's very important to ventilate, to exhaust out air, to have adequate air changes in the space. So in case you have an office where you don't have a fresh air system designed into your air conditioning, so in that case, please open windows, open doors, allow the outside air to come in case so in addition to that, also please augment if you have adequate exhaust fans, great. Otherwise, add on exhaust fans so that there is a negative pressure created, the indoor air is getting thrown out and more of the outside air is coming in. So again, encourage air exchange. If you have a fresh air system, please make sure that the dampers are on so that you can take advantage of the system. Otherwise, you have the system and you're not actually reaping any benefits of it. Also advised is 5 CFM per person. So that much fresh air should be coming into the space. Other than that, in terms of, okay, so once we have so much fresh air coming in, unless you have a treated fresh air system, you will see a drop in the efficiency of the air conditioning. So we need to sort of get on board with that yes, it will not be as comfortable as we are used to. And we would need to maintain temperatures between 24 degrees and 30 degrees centigrade. And humidity is also very important. Between 40 to 70% humidity is what we should be maintaining. In case you have a heat recovery wheel installed in your air conditioning system, please keep that off, because it's possible to have cross contamination with that. So currently, please keep those off. And before you restart them, then have a proper deep sanitization of that happening before you turn them on. If you want to avoid the loss in air conditioning, then yes, you need to go in for treated fresh air systems. But again, that's not something that you can suddenly install. That requires a more extensive work happening. But yes, immediately, or stopgap arrangements, if you have treated fresh air, keep it on, clean your filters, allow the fresh air to come in. And if you don't have that, then windows, please keep them open. Have your maintenance done, cleaning done, have all of that ready. And further systems, of course, this is not the best time for businesses to be going in for very extensive sort of work. People need to open up quickly. So, other things are for later. That's it.
Monica, can you go back to the slide? I have a couple of questions here, which I want to sort of, address.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mr. Bamji is asking, their office has no windows and they're fully air conditioned, fully centralized air conditioned. Mr. Bamji, essentially, as the slide says, the temperature is 24 to 30 degrees. The humidity between 40 to 70%. You will have to count on your central AC system having a proper ventilation stream, which is non-contaminative, in order to ensure that if you can't open doors or windows. And this is the case in many offices, particularly which are higher up, where they don't have windows and you have to count on your ventilation system. Just a note on this, please note that the vast majority of installations of AHU HVAC systems in India are terrible. Please make sure you get yours checked. I have seen personally a lot of sloppy jobs across offices all across the country. People don't take it as seriously as they should. The professional standards on ducting isn't up to the point where, it's fine for everyday use. It's definitely not fine if you're trying to prevent cross-contamination. And so I know this is just another thing that's going to add to your budget, but if you can get a good consultant to quickly come in and just tell you at least what's wrong. And so you can then figure out what's the best solution under those circumstances. The second point is 24 to 30 degrees Celsius, 4 to 7% humidity. This is not going to be comfortable, people. This is not going to be comfortable. And I think, and this is why you need to look at other HR policies, perhaps changing your dress code a little bit. Maybe seeing if you can compensate in other ways to allow people to keep cool, where you're not able to have your standard things. I mean, even for example, having desk fans and fans inside room pose a hazard because you're moving aerosol particles from one side of the room to the other. and you're breaking your entire social distancing. So nobody's saying this is going to be easy. No one's saying it's going to be convenient, and no one is saying it's going to be comfortable. But this is the reality we have to live in for a few months, maybe a year or more. And so part of it is to make sure that your employees, if you're in HR, your fellow co-workers, make the necessary adjustments to make sure that they are actually being able to, survive through this time and thrive. At the end of the day, you do have to get work done. So please get your stuff checked. Make sure that you have that your HVAC, your central air condition, is reasonably certified. No one's asking you to set up a clean room or a pharmaceutical plant here. But as Parnika pointed out, there's some very big basics that you can do to improve the situation. Parnika, can you get to the next slide? I just want to make a quick comment.
I just wanted to say
please.
that if they don't have any windows in that in the office, then in all probability they would have a fresh air system in the building. And so one hint is that if when you open the doors, if you get a blast of cold air on you, then that means that you do have a fresh air system, because then it's positive. There is positive pressure inside. Air is being pumped into the building, and that's why you're getting a blast of air in your face when you open the door. So where there are no windows, it would have been designed with the fresh air system. So you actually just need to look into, if there is adequate fresh air being pumped in, and what kind of system is it? Is it an AHU based system, or is it like a ducted kind of system? And accordingly, your, the system would be addressing the matter. Other than this,
so this is a slide. If you want to contact Parnika to ask her questions or get them to help you redesign your space, this is going to be there. You can note down the numbers and the emails. What I'm also going to do is in the chat, I have posted our CI groups, both the Telegram and the WhatsApp. You don't get bombarded with posts. We only post things maybe once in 4 days, once in 3 days, once a week. We will be putting the recording of this webinar in entirety there. I've also sent you the list of all of CII's previous webinars, which are recorded and for your convenience. And I will follow up with Parnika to make sure that her presentation is put on the Telegram group and WhatsApp group in some way or form. So at least you'll have access to all of that. Please, Parnika, go ahead.
We've also put together a little checklist for people to be able to self-assess their own offices to see what all they've got and what all they need to do. So they can visit the website on www.nbma.in, and it's called the Retrofit and Restart Checklist, and they can download it, and we hope that will help.
That is absolutely brilliant. And, join our Telegram and WhatsApp groups. We'll send out the link there as well. I think it's a phenomenal way to get started. I love checklists because of this. It just makes things a lot easier. And I think that's a very low key, easy way to start. Thank you so much, Parnika, for the slide. You can stop sharing screen now. Yeah. I'm going to see, can we get Vivian in? Vivian, is your audio finally working?
Hi, yes, it is.
Yes, we have you. Great. I have some questions for you coming in. So we're going to rapid fire through this.
Sure.
We have an anonymous question. One of the big problems that people are facing is, as they are now opening up, they are trying to move away from what has now become a common Zoom interview or an online virtual interview into physical interviews. For a lot of people, that's still very important. We have one question coming in, that how do you design the space, particularly if you're having a lot of interviews come in? Historically, we've seen these things, right? Yeah. 2-3 interview rooms, a waiting room full of people coming in, keep people coming out, no social distancing whatsoever, hotbed for COVID. How do you see people redesigning this process to keep people safe, but still be productive, still have those large number of interviews?
So I think, Aditya, just as we're looking to have social distancing within the workplace, and we're saying that we can't go back to having 100% density of the employees that we had in the office previously, in the same way, we can't expect to interview candidates in dozens and scores at the same time. And that we would probably have to thin out the number of people that we interview in any particular day at any particular time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that just like Parnika showed in her presentation, where meeting rooms also had screen guards in them, I think that's another thing that's going to happen even when you're interviewing somebody, that you would have to have the relevant screen guards and other protective gear that would be required when having a meeting with somebody, especially since you don't know whether that person is COVID positive or not, because he could also be asymptomatic. So we can't think that we're going to go back to conducting interviews the way it used to be previously. Yes, interviews will need to be conducted, and yes, they need to be physical interviews also, one-on-one interviews. Well, not necessarily one-on, but it needs to be across the table interviews, and care has to be taken.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of our big takeaways. Unfortunately, we have to adjust to a new normal, and we have to adapt. And I'm sure many of our people in the audience, like you're all here with us today. I mean, this traditionally would have been in a small closed door amphitheater with, all of our panelists, maybe 2 feet distance, 1 feet distance, sitting on chairs. And all of you would be jam packed in, and we'd be in a room with God knows what the air conditioning and HVAC system was doing to spread all the germs left, right, and center. We are here. Obviously, using e-interviews, virtual, this, that, hasn't been the norm. But, there is a limit to how much you can change a physical space to adapt. And that's one of the big things which I sort of wanted to cover. There is going to be a transition point. I think everybody still today is really hoping that this is a 6 months, 1 year, max 1.5 year thing, right? The vaccine at some point will come out. Maybe, herd immunity will start to hit. The weather will change, all sorts of factors, which we are all hoping that, we are not under COVID for the next, 2, 3, 4 years. So a lot of what we are talking about in terms of quickly changing your office space is to get by the next 6 months to 1 year. I don't think anybody here is saying that this is how we plan to work for the next 10, 20 years. And that's why it's so important for you as you're opening up to get those checklists, talk to workspace designers like Vivian and Parnika to try to get your offices up and running in the next 30 days, giving you 6 months to 8 months in your current space to then figure things out. And once we start to get back to normal, then you can relook and figure out what's the next great space that you need. Maybe you can reuse your existing office space with a little bit more flexibility, or maybe you need a new space. I don't think today, and don't hold me to this because I no clue what the next circular will come out. But I presume no one is going to be investing in a social distanced building, which they plan to open in the next 2 years. I think everything what you're talking about is things you have to do now, changes you have to make today. This is not something you should be waiting that, okay, this is now the workplace of the future. This is not a workplace of the future webinar. This is the workplace of literally the next 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and hopefully not more than 1 year, maximum a year and a half. And so hopefully to the person who asked this question, you'll be back doing your in-person face-to-face interviews sooner rather than later. But until then, follow the best practices that we have here. Make sure that, as Parnika had mentioned, from the entry to the exit of the person, everything is sort of mapped out and tightly controlled, and use the checklist to ensure that. We have something like 15, 20 minutes with us, so we'd love for people to ask more questions. We have a whole bunch, and we're going to get through. Vivian, you had a point here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to, so I completely agree with everything you said, and I just wanted to add that, I missed the earlier part, so I may be reiterating, but I just wanted to add that right now, Parnika's presentation essentially showed the workspace kind of coming down to about 50%, 40 to 50% occupancy because of the number of desks that will have to be left vacant. And we were discussing, and we're working with our clients on some of these things now, that simply using the available space within the office right now, it may be possible to reorient and replan out the open office areas of the workspace and come back to perhaps 75% of the number of employees by relocating, reorienting existing furniture, existing systems that they have. And that could be something that could be an arrangement for the next 6 to 8 months, 10 months, till more things develop and we get a clearer idea of the future.
Brilliant. We had a question on the Arroya Setu app. I just want to clarify that, Mr. Shah, who's asked that. In the earlier notifications by the center and several states, it was made mandatory. As of the new guidelines, which are applicable to 31st May, for most states and the center, it is not. It is recommended, but not mandatory. But watch this space. We will be getting new guidelines, I believe, in the next 2 to 3 days as well. And in general, my advice to everybody here is that do combine what the center says with what state says, because often states might have their own requirements. Plus, if your office or workplace or home is in a particular type of zone, red zone, green zone, and all of those other zones that each state has come up with, you might have more stringent requirements. And I wish we had a single source website where all of this was there. We've been requesting, as CII has been requesting governments for the last 2-3 months to please have a single website for all state and center announcements for the workplace, for industries and all. It's come closer. The official COVID-19 website of the central government does have most of the notifications, but it's not comprehensive and you might be a couple of days late by the time it comes into. So please pay attention, make sure that somebody in your office, HR, your senior manager, or even you, is just keeping an eye on the latest lockdown notices, both at the center level and at the state level. I have a question maybe from Mr. Bamji. Is there a list of government approved sanitizers to use in the office? But not talking about the the day-to-day sanitizers, which, you know, we do know they have a certain alcohol percentage that has to be there, but talking about professional sanitization supplies or equipment that they do either via an agency or by the municipality. Is there a list of chemicals that are authorized to be used against COVID?
Oh,
Vivian, did you get that question?
no, I'm sorry. So is there a list of Sanitize?
Of authorized professional sanitization and
I'm
cleaning
not aware of
supplies?
such a list. I am not aware of such a list. But there are a number of private agencies that have, what should I say? They are offering these services now, so they've got their SOPs in place, they've got their checklists in place, and I think the starting point of all of this is Bangalore, and I think they've spread out to other places as well now.
And I think before the sanitizer manufacturers actually start manufacturing, they have to get approvals on certain things from various agencies on the ingredients that they're using. So I think that covers it to a large extent. But if there is any such list, and we are not like experts on chemicals, and we won't be able to.
No, fair enough, Pranika. Mr. Bamji, what we've been using and we've been recommending is the European Union has come out with a list of approved chemicals. This is called the COVID-19 list of disinfectant active substances and products. It's a list that has been approved by the European Chemicals Agency. I am going to paste that in the chat so you have that list. I think this is a great place to start. The good news is that because COVID-19 is a virus, what agents work on viruses are well studied. And you can imagine that if a soap done right can kill the virus, there's a large number of chemicals and disinfectants. I have pushed this list on. I do know there are certain guidelines for government offices that are now available online, so please search for them. But in general, if you use the European data set or if you use the US data set, I believe the CDC has it by brand. The European has it by chemical name as well. The only caution which I will ask you is two very simple things. Please pay attention to the percentage of concentration and dilution, right? And so there's a big difference between a 5% bleach and a 50% bleach. And the second, for some of these chemicals, if your sanitization team is not used to them, is to please read the MSDS, which is the hazardous substance list on how these chemicals impact. The last thing what you want to do is to move from your standard list of chemicals to something more potent and put your office staff at risk. Some of these chemicals, for example, household normal bleach is great. It works very effectively and it has proven safe for many years. If you're using something stronger or something more exotic, just make sure to read the MSDS, both for the safety of the people in your office and also for the safety of the sanitization workers who are applying it. Great question.
A lot of vendors and people who deal in material, they have also come out with guidelines on how their product should be cleaned. So it would also be a good idea to check with people that you have purchased certain things from, if it's a specialized product, then on how it should be cleaned and which disinfectants would be okay to use on that product.
We have a question from Thelma De Silva. What would be the body temperature while checking for a COVID person in the office? My apologies, we are not doctors, but I can only tell you what we have heard from the other SOPs. Essentially, so far, again, this is hearsay, not health advice, not legal advice, so don't hang me if I'm fully wrong. But essentially, if anybody has a fever above the human normal, that is when you need to do a symptom checklist with them. Make sure that they haven't been in contact with anybody with COVID, make sure that they haven't been traveling. Obviously, if you have a fever for several days, which is unexplained, you should get yourself checked out. In general, most offices should refuse to deny people whose temperature is above the human body normal, which is in Celsius is 36.5 to 37 degrees. In Fahrenheit, of course, is the 98.4 to I think 98.8 or 99 degrees Celsius. Yeah. So, but do check with your doctor and the latest government guidelines on this. In general, for now, and if you ask me this question 3 months from now, that might change. If somebody has a fever, send them home. There is no need to take a risk of waiting for a temperature to go up to 100, 101, 102, or like 37.8. Because then they have a real temperature. If they have a fever, send them home immediately. Don't allow them to enter your premises. Then get on a phone call with them, ask their symptoms, ask what's happening, etc. Maybe self-isolation for a couple of days, maybe a doctor's visit to figure out what's going on with them. For right now, safe rather than sorry, both for the physical health of your employees and you, as well as for your legal liability. The last thing you want is, a person to walk in, he has a fever, you say borderline. You let them into your office, they infect everybody. Then you have an entire team of COVID isolators show up at your office and they say, okay, show us your temperature chart registry. And oh my God, you allowed a person in with a high temperature or even a slightly abnormal temperature. That said, also please note, we haven't covered this perhaps there, is please maintain a temperature register at your office, whether it is handwritten, whether it's automatic. For those who have a little bit more money available, you can use a thermal scanner camera that will automatically take temperatures from a distance. You don't have to use the close by thing, which in itself puts the person taking that thermal temperature at risk. So please, if you can afford it, get one of these fancy IR cameras. They're not very expensive. And that can keep your people at your front desk also safe. There are also now automatic kiosks, which number of companies are selling, where a person comes up to a certain distance, it automatically takes a picture, their temperature is displayed, recorded, and they go through. So there's a lot of technology innovation happening around this to make it a lot easier and to keep your people safe.
You also have thermal boom barriers. So, if you have a temperature, then it beeps and it may not allow you through. So that's
absolutely.
Like that.
Right. So there are a lot of stuff that you can do at entrances to make sure that you're checking temperatures. But if it is above normal, above the normal range of human temperature, which is considered a fever, please send the person home. You can all, and if they're fine the next morning, nothing's wrong with them, fantastic. But I just want to, from an HR perspective, that's something that Mr. Singh also said, is please don't make it into a social issue, right? That, oh, so-and-so has a temperature, now they have to go home, and make them feel bad about it. Because all they're going to do is they're going to go home, take a crocine, and come back. And guess what? They have no temperature, but they might have COVID. So please make sure that your employees know that it's okay that if they have a temperature to go home and wait a couple of days to see where it is, work from home if they can. Don't put yourself and them at risk. Don't make it, oh my God, you have a temperature. Otherwise they will eat a paracetamol and they'll be back to work, and that doesn't help anybody. Brilliant. Questions. Okay, we can't answer questions about, maybe we can. Vivian Pernica, do you want to take answer questions about how to go and travel in hotel rooms and keep safe there? Maybe carry one of those keys with you at all times.
So that's it's a really tricky thing, because you are, after all, going to sleep on a bed, and you are going to be using a toilet. And while most good hotels already have good sanitization protocols in place, at the end of the day, there's always a chance, there's always a risk. However, the way I look at it is that, just like Angela Merkel has already said, and Boris Johnson has already said, 75 to 80% of us are going to contact COVID-19 at some point. It's just a matter of sooner or later. So if we're staying in hotels that are taking due care to sanitize rooms possibly as well as possible, then there's nothing much that you can do other than just be careful while you're walking around the premises, which are being shared with other people. So when you go to the restaurant to eat, please be careful over there. If you're in the lobby, please be careful over there. Maintain social distancing over there. But while you're in your room itself, you would have to trust that the hotel has done the best that they could. That's the way I would be looking at it.
Absolutely. And if you are truly concerned, and you should be, I would call ahead and ask them what their cleaning protocol is. I think most good brand hotels, whether they are 5-star or 3-star, have started to publish what their cleaning protocols is. I know a couple of brands have done a great job of being very transparent on how they are going to manage the COVID scenario, particularly to reassure their customers that they have this in hand. It's of course increased their expense by a lot, and we are seeing a huge stress in the tourism industry because of it. But ask them, if I come to your hotel, how am I going to be safe? And at the end of the day, you have to take personal responsibility for your own health. So please be careful, regardless of what the hotel says. Take lots of hand sanitizer with you. Don't presume they'll have it. Make sure that frequently touched surfaces you are a little bit more conscious of. I don't know if you can get hands, but there are a lot of companies which are now selling bleach wipes, which you can carry in your suitcases with you. You can just take out a wipe and just wipe down any major surface just once, just to be extra sure. And so there are a few simple things that you can do that will decrease the probability to a large extent. I mean, you're not going to be able to get 100%. The only way to get 100% is to build an isolation bubble and sit in it, and you're 100%. If you're going to interact with the world, it's just about controlling risk, right? So your 100% will go to 99, 98, 95, 90, and as long as you're in the high 90s, the chances of you getting this are very, very little. We have a couple of minutes. Are there any last questions? Pernica, do you have any last comments you'd like to make?
I think Vivian can come in. I've taken up a lot of time already.
So Aditya, the last thing I think we'd like to say is that we shouldn't completely discount the fact that work from home may have one last push again in the months to come, because there are predictions that June and possibly winter might see spikes happening again, in which case some offices may say, look, let's take precautions, let's try and have more people work from home during those months. So it would be good if offices paid little attention to what are the protocols that they would like to set up for people working from home. And so the earlier work from home caught us by surprise. If there's another work from home situation, it shouldn't catch us by surprise this time. So I would recommend that people actually spend some time trying to figure out how they would like to have their work from home arrangements, especially in terms of home infrastructure. So getting a good internet connection. Maybe if some people need to have printers at home that they don't have at the moment, then organize that. Get a dedicated work desk that they use that they don't necessarily share with their family members or their roommates or things like that. So a little bit of thought put in now would make things much easier and allow people to be better prepared.
I think that's a great point. Now we've all done this overnight. I mean, in India, we had almost zero, a pre-warning that you have to now all go home and work and not show up to office. I think, building up proper internet connections, investing in proper video conferencing infrastructure, even if it's just taking a couple of paid accounts for your favorite video conference client, making sure that all your employees have access to a faster internet connection. In 2020, that is easier than ever before. And so I think, the excuse that, oh, my internet is slow, is slowly not working anymore. And have a protocol for this happens. But also have a protocol because, it is highly likely now that the lockdown is ending, you will get a couple of people with COVID in your workplace. It's going to happen. Just know it's going to happen. And be ready for that. Don't wake up one morning and say, oh my God, there's a guy with COVID or there's there's a guy with COVID running around in our office. It's going to happen. Have your protocols ready. Have the quarantine rooms ready. Have the letters you're going to send to all your employees ready. Have the doctors ready, where you're going to go, how you're going to do it. If you have to send everybody to work from home while you sanitize the workplace, have that ready. The number of days of quarantine that you guys have to do. Do you have access to COVID testing or COVID antibody testing by the time that happens, maybe in 15 days to a month? So those are some of the things that you should think about. There are last couple of questions which I'd love to get. We have a couple of questions on people who have who are at risk and have prior, either. Well, you've talked about breathing disorders, but it could be heart, it could be hypertension. All of these things are very much linked to poor COVID outcomes. We're also seeing people are getting very scared and they're not even willing to come into offices because they've been psychologically traumatized by the entire thing. And look, it's going to be hard, to be very honest. And if certainly a person is at risk, they should be the last employee in the building. Once you've got your SOPs done, once you've got everything ready, once you've run this for 2 to 3 weeks, once you're confident that you're able to maintain, only then ask them to come in. Otherwise, try and do for them work from home as much as possible because they are at high risk. And certainly people who are above the age of 60, 65 should definitely be the last people to come back into the office. Everyone else should go first. And I think HR, all what we've talked about today are all the amazing, impressive steps that you can do to make sure that your workplace is safe. And communicate that to people. Communicate to people that this is what we're doing to keep the workplace safe. Get them involved in case they want to add any more protection. If they want to add more protection for themselves and bring something from home, allow them to do that. You want people to feel safe. You want people to come in and say, look, my workplace has done a great job in ensuring that all this is taken care of. And certainly that I as an individual will be protected to a probabilistic point. And we are all going to have those very difficult conversations. I think we've just hit out of time. I really want to thank Parnika and Vivian for this amazing, amazing presentation. Thank you so much for walking through this. This is a very timely manner. Thank you so much for all of our audience for joining us. I really hope all of you are at home, safe, doing well, and we can all come back to work and get back to normal as soon as possible. Once again, I have shared a number of things on the chat. This includes, the links to the CII full series. We have also linked to groups where we can connect in and we can push through. Please also connect with us on LinkedIn And you can reach out to Pernika and Vivian if you have any further questions, or you can send the questions to CII if you're a member. We'd be happy to help you during this time. Thank you, stay safe, and please stay positive.
Thank you so much for having us on. It was really great. Thank you, Aditya, and thank you, CII.